And yes, if there's anything you don't want shared publicly, then feel free to just ask me after. But again, I'm really happy to see all of you. And if you do have a camera and can turn it on, that'd be great, because I would love to see you guys and your babies. And maybe you'll get to see my toddler later. Hi. Okay, I'm Sarah Walkenfeld. I'm the Chief Learning Officer at Safaria. I really appreciate you all making the time. Everyone's super busy. Just a few technical notes about Zoom before we get started. Zoom, which is for so many of us our new life, but it's been my life for a long time. So please keep yourself muted except for when you're speaking. If you can keep your camera turned on, that's awesome. I'd love for people to get to have a sense of what everyone else does and what everyone else is grappling with right now. So if you feel comfortable putting your name and something about what you do in the chat, if you have any questions or issues you're thinking about coming into this conversation, go ahead and put it all in the chat. We'll all be happy to see it. I'm going to pause periodically for questions. I'm going to share a link with you in the chat that has the overall structure for what I planned to talk about today, but I am super flexible and will be we'll move in conjunction with your issues and your questions. But I do have a sheet to share with you. And after each item on this sheet, maybe some other times also, I'll pause, I'll check the chat, and I'll take your questions. So, and as they come to your mind, if you're worried about losing it, feel free to dump it into the chat. And that way I'll be able to see it afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and share that link now. Okay, so that Safaria sheet should be in the chat now, and we'll be sharing that out online as well as sharing the recording later on. So that's on the technical side, and I'm recording. Okay, great. You are really all on the front lines of this crisis in so many ways. I mean, not healthcare workers, but I think that educators right now are dealing with so much, and so much has changed so quickly. And I say this as not only as an educator, but also as a parent who currently has 4 children who are each on a Zoom call with a different teacher, which is incredible and amazing and worth appreciating, even if we all wish we weren't in these circumstances right now. So that's amazing. And I have so much appreciation as an educator and as a parent for everything that you do. About me for a moment, just because I don't know all of you personally, I'm a Jewish educator, and I want you to know that mostly, and I like getting to know you, and also so that you understand where I'm coming from a little bit. I've been working for Safaria since the beginning, really, for about 7 years now. Before that, I was a Hillel educator, so I worked at Princeton University as the director of education in the Hillel there. Also a wonderful experience. And I also want you to know that I have no particular tech background. So I'm not a very tech savvy person. As of 8 a.m. this morning, my 13-year-old was berating me for not knowing how to use all the necessary apps that will come in handy for him as his classes move online. Like, I am not your go-to person for technology at all. And I am telling you that uninspiring fact so that you will understand that I really believe that if I can do it, then you can do it. And the tools on Safaria that I'm going to show you today are highly, highly, highly usable. If you can click and you can read, then you can use Safaria, and our team is really here to support you. These are unprecedented times, and so Safaria use looks a little different now. How many of you, by a show of hands, if your camera's on, have used Safaria before? Okay, great. So most people. I think that we are, we're seeing something really interesting, which is that there are many people who maybe would have liked to use Safaria in the past. They knew about it, or they didn't know so much about it. Maybe people use Safaria for preparation, but they would never use it in their classroom or in their synagogue school. You just might not have thought of using digital technology for Jewish text previously. And now a lot of us feel like we have no choice. So this situation is pushing us to adapt really quickly. I did a training on Sunday for a local synagogue school, a large school. I trained about 20 teachers. The training was planned before any of this started, when they were doing in-person classes and they were just thinking about starting to dip a toe into maybe using some digital technology. And of course, then this happened. I did the training online. Everyone's thinking has completely shifted. And again, I want to acknowledge it's hard to shift our thinking that quickly. And yet we tell our students, so maybe we also believe that there's something positive in being pushed outside our comfort zones. in ways that can ultimately maybe be fruitful. So I hope that that's the case. And I hope that that will be the case for the tools that I'm going to show you today, that they'll inspire you to think differently about education in this moment, and also maybe that they'll be useful when hopefully we all go back to whatever normal was for us. I can see from the comments that there's some of you at least are thinking about religious school online teaching, resources for teachers. I'm going to put the link in the chat one more time in case some of you joined after I put it there. And this is the sheet that I'm going to go through, and you should also feel free to ask questions in the chat about any of this, or, again, raise other issues that you'd like to discuss. I'm also going to share my screen. So hang on one sec while I extricate myself from all my extra windows and do that. Here we go. Okay, so it seemed that a lot of you have used Sefaria before. In brief, if you haven't, Sefaria is a free online library of Jewish texts. We're a living library of Jewish texts. We believe in building the future of Torah by putting a full textual library online, but also really engaging student voices, engaging learner voices. From our perspective, so that you're inside the Sefaria lingo, we refer to learners. So students are learners, educators are learners, Jew on the street is a learner, anyone could be a learner, and that's how we think about it. So we try not to make a lot of distinctions because anyone could engage with Jewish texts and find them relevant to their lives. This is not a Sefaria 101 class, but we do have that available. And so I'm kicking us off, because so often I leave this for the end and then I forget. I'm kicking us off with a view of Sefaria's educator landing page. So this is, oops, I hope you can see the URL. It's sefaria.org/educators. And it's not, unfortunately, so easy always to find from the site. But if you don't receive our educator resources and you want to, which will be bumping up during this time, or if you ever want a training for your team specifically, your faculty, your staff specifically, if you want to see tutorials on any of the things that I'm going to talk about today, if you want to see examples from other educators, if you need to request a text or a translation, we have a translator on our staff. He's part-time. He's about to have a lot of free time because he just is wrapping up a big project. Any of those things, you should know about these links. So bookmark that for yourself, sefaria.org/educators, and really feel free to reach out anytime. Also, hello, HELLO, @sefaria.org is like our main go-to helpline. So if you need help, email us and someone will respond. You can also email me, but the hello line gets checked more frequently. So just some resources to kick you off. The homepage on Sefaria you could always find by clicking on the top there, Sefaria. This is what the homepage looks like when you're signed in, I should say. So I'm signed into Sefaria. You can see because the Samech icon is up here in the upper right-hand corner. And you can always get into our text library in the upper left-hand corner with that 3-line button. So those are all available to you. This is our library of Jewish texts. Hopefully you know about it. Again, hopefully it's something that you've used or you've seen before. I want to kick off by talking about empowering learners with Sefaria's library. So whatever material you had, whatever curricular materials you had, not only are you going to need to think about taking those and putting them online, but you also need, sorry for the toddler noise, you also need to think about what are some of the new modalities that you might use to present those materials, because it may be that you already have everything in a Google Doc. You can just turn it over to the students or to your teachers to teach the students. It may not be the case. It's also true, I will have more data on this by the end of the day, because again, each of my children has like 5 hours of lessons with their teachers, but it's really harder to keep kids engaged. I mean, it sounds sort of counterintuitive. Kids are engaged by screens all the time, so are adults, but in terms of learning something on a screen, you may need to shift those modalities a little bit. So I want to speak for a few minutes about empowering learners with our library. This library view, is something that really anyone can use. Sefaria works a lot like Google. You click to get more information. So I'll grab this week's Torah portion just for argument's sake. I clicked into it, I opened it. And now I'm going to click on a verse to open the commentary. I'm in Hebrew and English. I like to do that. I like to be side by side with Hebrew and English. That might not work for your population, and hopefully you know that you can change around language and font size and all those things with the Aleph A button that's at the top. Here's my sidebar. I have 82 commentaries, lots of other connections, and a million other things going on. So I'll pause on this screen for a second. The chances that anyone is going to read 82 commentaries are really low, even when those comments are in English, which some of them are. And as I click in, you'll see Rashi's in English, Ramban is in English. Okay, great. If I had to teach a lesson on the Parsha right now, I would use this screen to teach, because maybe, I haven't really done that much work on this week's Torah portion, in all honesty, but maybe the first verse is a good starting point. Second verse actually is looking good, right? Because most of your learners will probably be familiar with the concept of Shabbat. Maybe we'll work on that one. So I'd start somewhere here, maybe, one of these first two verses. And even without opening up any of the commentaries, I think it's interesting that there are 50 comments on this verse. Learners of almost any age, I would say probably second graders and up, could have a conversation about, what does this verse mean? And can you think of 5 questions about this verse? Because something had to spark 50 comments. 50 is a big number of comments to have about a verse. And that does a few things. First of all, it opens up a conversation. It's an open-ended conversation because you could, depending on the age and stage of your learners, then look at some of those comments together. And it also shows people that they're part of a larger ecosystem of learning, that there's this world of Jewish texts out there. They're gonna dip a finger into, they're gonna dip a toe into it, and there's an opening to a conversation. So when I have the ability to teach dynamically, I like using these kinds of views. Maybe you're dealing with more advanced students who can read a verse and the accompanying Rashi. So then this view is great. You can play with what you want to have side by side here. It's also, I think, worth noting in terms of engagement, and this is maybe more moving to what, again, students of certain ages, certainly adult learners, can be taught to explore on their own. So ancient texts are hard, rabbinic commentaries are hard. As you scroll down in this resources bar, I hope you know about our Sheets feature. So public sheets available on Sefaria. Sefaria will first show you any sheets that you have on this verse, right, that connect to this verse, and then it'll show you public sheets, which does a million things for me. As an educator, I usually go to this if my question is like, what do people speak about when they speak about this parsha? Or what do people speak about when they speak about this topic or this verse? I would go here. But now I think this is a great opening for our families, for our congregants, maybe for our synagogue school families, to see what's interesting and exciting here. This is especially true if there's an educator in your community who might have a public sheet available, or if you want to make a resource sheet available to families, because any sheet that is in this sidebar, first of all, freely accessible, freely reusable, and it's also something that you can open side by side with the verse. So, oops, I did not want to do that. Sorry, I clicked on his name, but really I want to show you how to open the sheet side by side. Okay, any one of these will be fine. So now I have the sheet open and the verses open side by side. So if you can imagine that this instead is 3 questions that you've created, 3 questions that a teacher in your program has created that can be displayed next to the verse. You can give people the URL. You can send out this link, the same as if you're like inviting someone to like view a product on Amazon, right? This is a unique URL, and you can send it to them, and they'll be able to see this view also. Because everything is digital, everything is very, very, very shareable, and that's really what we need at this point in time. So thinking about, again, how can you use the library view to engage others with a single question, with a view of a text, with a quick look at a piece. One thing that we sometimes hear about Sefaria is there's so much there, there's so much information, it's scary. And again, I will just say that it is, and the internet is a scary place. And I just found out that my 2nd grade daughter's class was messaging emojis to each other on Zoom when they were supposed to be studying with their teacher. So it's a scary place, it's a dangerous place. And usually I have a whole speech that I give on why it's important to let students kind of explore But actually, I don't need to give that speech right now because, as circumstances are, you're all convinced basically. And we have to let people explore, we have to let people do that. So I think, and the truth is that this is either the good news or the bad news, depending on who you are. Tech savviness and not text savviness is the best predictor for success on Sefaria. So I have watched third graders who don't read and speak Hebrew fluently at all, or like have very minimal Hebrew. I have watched them breeze through Sefaria. I trained STEM teachers in Jewish schools who were not themselves Jewish and had no Hebrew beyond Shabbat Shalom and Boker Tov. I trained them to use Sefaria. So that's, again, the good news if you're tech savvy, not such great news if you don't feel as comfortable with that, but your students probably do. Two other quick points on that, and then I'll pause for questions. Sefaria pairs well with other apps, other kinds of technology. So you can grab this link and you can WhatsApp it to a whole group of people. You can grab a link and you can text it to people. You can embed it. You can embed a sheet. I'll show you that in a minute. You can embed a sheet in a synagogue website. You can post things to Facebook. So you're not limited to this specific, right, just to this platform. It pairs well with other things. And because it's so easy to share with, again, those who are tech savvy, consider ways that you can deputize people to help you with this piece of it. I know in our community, we've had kind of an outpouring of support, often with no place to go, right? People are contacting me and saying, my teenager is home and would love to help with your kids, except my teenager can't actually be in the same place as your kids because we're all self-isolating. So, right, those older kids can be deputized to help older adults or younger kids over the phone, over Zoom, with technology. You can have like a madrich, madricha system or whatever you call like older advisors in your programs. So that's all something to think about, again, knowing that it's really the technical piece that's going to be the most pressing here. Okay, I'm pausing for questions, comments, follow-up, anything you'd like to say. I didn't see anything come in via chat, so I'm going to keep sharing my screen for now, but please give me a shout out if there's anything you'd like to ask about. No, okay, you all look pretty comfortable. I will go on. But again, feel free to park things in the chat if there's anything else. Use all available media for communal experiences. I don't know exactly what you're trying to accomplish, what you had planned that's now being derailed. I wish I did. I really am so interested to hear what everyone is thinking and working on right now. But I do know that often our synagogue settings, our synagogue schools are very focused on tactile experiences, in-person experiences, right? That's what the synagogue space usually is for. It's for coming together. So think about ways that you can focus energy around Jewish rituals or prayers that families might choose to preserve at this time, or ones that they might take on. So that could mean that you have some kind of children's tefillah that could be engaged with in some other way. And my kids had prayer online this morning, although I have no idea what that looked like because I was on Zoom calls. It could be that a family that participates in something only when they're in synagogue and they don't do it in the home might consider doing it. They might consider doing it in their home during this time when they can't get into the synagogue. So that could be that there's a piece from Birkat HaMazon that you want to share with families and ask them to take on as a practice now that everyone is sort of at home for all their meals. It could be a bedtime Shema ritual. There's lots of different things, and I would consider short videos, audio recordings. I have seen amazing, rabbi colleague of mine at a large Reform temple just sent me this morning her virtual sermon, which I think is beautiful and also so much work. So much work. I record myself sometimes. It's so much work. Think about a 1-minute intro video to a text. Think about a 1-minute audio recording that you embed into a sheet. Think about something quick that you can do that provides, whether it's your presence and voice, whether it's your teacher's presence and voice, right? Something that kind of gives it that personal touch, draws people into the experience, but doesn't require you to actually teach a full online class. again, I'm just guessing, maybe you'll tell me, no, I have tons of time to teach online classes. That's great. If you don't have children at home, that might be true. If you do, or you suddenly had to like do a 180 on all your Passover planning, then you might not. And the sheets on Safari are very, very flexible. So again, I'm hoping you've used our library in some way, shape, or form. But I also want to show you what the sheets look like. I'm going to go into my Safari account. I'm logged in. Again, I clicked in that little icon there. Actually, the truth is this is Safari's education account, and I think maybe I'm going to show you my account instead. Well, I'll show you this first. You can embed audio, video, images, artwork, all of those things can go onto a Safari sheet. And I could tell you any other time why I think that's a good thing in general, but now I think it's really crucial. So I click to create a new sheet, and I'll call this new source sheet test sheet very creatively, and I'm going to click save. And you can hopefully see that the options here are a source, which is anything from within Safari's library, a text, which is anything else you want to copy and paste in, media, or comment. I want to focus for a second on the media piece. Or MP3. When I'm done with this call, I'm gonna, hopefully this is gonna work, I'm gonna take the recording of this video, I'm gonna put it up on YouTube, and then I'll embed it into the sheet that I just sent you. And so I have everything all in one place. All the texts, all the comments I gave you, any questions for prompts, and as well as the recording. So think about ways that you might creatively pair media. Sheets can also be collaborative. They don't have to be something that just one person creates. So with this share button, you can change it so that it is, right now the sheet is set to anyone with access can view. You can change that to add or edit. Most of the time, if you're working with students, I recommend the add feature, and then you click save. And if I were to share this with you, or here, I can make this sheet, anyone can add. Maybe I'll do that later on. If I were to share that with you, then you could add to that sheet. So what does that mean? It means that I can have a prompt here, and students can add, or families can add their own recording. So you have that, you gave a little intro to the bedtime Shema ritual, and now you can have recordings of every family doing that with, with their families, or you can have them post their comments. I think that these kinds of like communal gathering spaces, even though right now they're virtual, I think that that's going to be really important. I think it's also really great to consider any media that students, teens, probably I should include here adults, probably I should edit to say that, are using because right, again, everyone's just engaging with so much media right now. So maybe it's an article from a newspaper that you think you'd like your congregants to discuss. You can put the link to that on a sheet and make it into a discussion space where people can discuss. Maybe you want to draw in a Torah text that connects to this article that you found. Maybe it's an article from somewhere else on the web that is, Jewish content related. And by the way, that's another space for kind of like modern media. If you haven't seen it yet, this is a relatively new feature, actually. I think a lot of people have not yet seen this. Wait, I think I want to go back to this week's Parsha. We have websites linked to the verses or the texts on our site as well. So as you scroll down in that resource bar, one of the options now is web pages. Any web page, any website that is out there that has citations and links to Sefaria, we now link out to them. So if you're thinking it would be great to give my congregants a My Jewish Learning article about Shabbat, you can see ones that quote this verse, put the article and the verse together on a sheet, open it up for comments, and let people go to town. I'm really curious. My hypothesis is that people will engage more than previously, given the situation. I don't know for sure, but that's what I'm thinking right now. Okay, I'm pausing for questions, and I'll also stop and check the chat for a second. Questions, comments, thoughts? I see positive feedback, which is great, and no specific questions. So let me know if you have any. Okay, great. Next, one more chat. Let's see. I can sort of see the chat here. The Haggadah is on Safaria, and I will get to that in a moment. And you can add media to it. I'll talk about that a little later on. Show and tell, next on my list. Think about, again, creating a focal point, communal gatherings. I think part of what's going on right now, again, based on the conversations I'm having with my rabbinic colleagues, I'm in a fellowship at Hartman with 26 congregational rabbis right now. My sense is that there's so much going on. One rabbi told me she's never been more in demand. One director of education in a synagogue told me that all the parents want to talk to them about how they could possibly keep their kids busy, but it's often very siloed. You're talking to one family at a time. You're talking to one congregant, one student at a time. I think it's going to be important going forward. You don't have your bulletin boards, right? Those hallways that you filled with artwork, those classrooms that you filled with your bulletin boards that were beautiful, you don't have access to that right now. And so we need to think about ways that we can put all of that in places where people can see it. So I think Safaria's groups are a great way to showcase learning that's shared across a class or a school or community. You can see that if you go to Safaria's library page and scroll down under resources, one of the options is groups. Groups are just groupings of sheets. Sometimes they're organizations, sometimes they're schools, sometimes they're synagogues. These are public groups. You don't have to make your group public. What this essentially does is it takes a grouping of sheets and makes it easily shareable. So I will show you a school group, a day school. This is not a religious school because I don't have any of those that are public right now, I don't think. Where'd it go? But we do have some religious schools that have made groups over the years. This is a school group from a couple of years ago. So this URL is all you need to share this entire group with people, which means if you have a curriculum that you're putting online, maybe it's not your whole curriculum, maybe it's just, the classes for this week or the classes for this month or the 4th grade classes for this month or whatever it is, or it's partial resources for the family. Anything can be a group. You can control, once you set up the group, who can add and publish to the group. And you can then invite people to make sheets or contribute to sheets, or they can just use the sheets that you've created. A sheet, again, is just a web page, so it can be really multimedia. These are sheets that were made by 8th graders, at least they were in 8th grade then. These were chesed projects that the students did, and they described the project. They embedded video. They have texts and they have explanations. The teacher gave them a very specific rubric. They had to explain why they put the text into the sheet. And that's a little bit advanced. It's an 8th grade day school, but I do think that there's ways to adapt that for every kind of audience. And again, these groupings are great places to showcase things that are going on. This link to the group was then sent out to the whole school community. Everyone had a sense of what these 8th graders were doing and what these 8th graders were working on. And I think that that's really beautiful. I think even under the best of circumstances, we should be raising up the voices of our educators and our students and giving people a sense of what actually goes on in our classrooms. So I really love that this is an option. And you might also check out the groups for great ideas. I mean, again, a lot of these pair media. Some of these are themselves great curricula. This is a great teen curriculum. If you're interested, the Jewish Teen Funders Network put this up not that long ago. We worked on it with them. It's a Jewish values-based curriculum, and I worked with their facilitators, which was really interesting. Most of them did not have strong backgrounds in Jewish text, but because these resources are here and adaptable, they were able to use them. And I think that for those of you, I'm just guessing here, but I had a call with a education director at a conservative synagogue this morning, and she told me that most of her teachers are college students. They need a lot of guidance under the best of circumstances, and this is not the best of circumstances. So resources that are created by you or created by someone else and can then be shared and are adaptable can be really key. Any sheet on Safaria can easily be adapted. You can go into anyone's sheet, and as long as you're in the edit mode, which is this little drop-down menu, you can edit the sheet. And you can, I will make it public later, I promise. You can always make a copy of the sheet, and then it's yours and you can adapt it. And that means that if you create a source sheet that has 4 great Passover texts and tell your teachers that they should each pick at least one, they can do that without copying and pasting. They can do that with just a few clicks on Safaria. So I'm interested in the ways that we can, again, use this to create digital spaces. And again, maybe you're sharing the text and your educators or your students are just sharing artwork. Here's a middle school sheet where the students learned about, this was a wrong time of year. This is not Passover, this is pre-Yom Kippur. They learned about the concept of repentance, and the students all made artwork that for them related to that concept. Images can be easily uploaded and embedded into sheets. And then here's the student's little explanation. I don't think there's actually any text on this sheet, and that's fine because it's a personal reflection paired with artwork. You can also think about, again, the groups. You can think about sharing student work this way, have various kinds of student work and Divrei Torah. Here's a fourth grader's Dvar Torah. This, I think, was a religious school, actually, where they learned some basic words. You can see she put in a verse, an image, a question, and then the teacher helped her answer the question. So these are ways, again, both to encourage people to work with text and also to showcase those texts. Okay, pausing again for questions, and I'll check the chat. Great, okay, I definitely do want to get to talking about the Haggadah. I'll go through the next piece quickly so I can get over to the Haggadah. Any other questions? Okay, great. Oh, one more maybe. The sheets can be saved as PDFs and mailed or printed. If you want to do that, I would just ask you kind of like why. There's nothing you can do with a PDF other than view it. So if you're sure, and it's important to you that the only thing that somebody do with this sheet is to look at it, then you should export it to Google Docs and export it as a PDF. If there's any possibility of them doing anything more with it, like clicking to see the larger context, or getting to know Safaria's library, or someday adapting it, or someday adding to it, or just you want to be able to change it later on, and it's a place for you to give them one resource and then another resource and then another resource. In that case, I would keep it in Safaria. It is just as shareable on Safaria as it is as a PDF. If you want to print, that's a different story. So file, export to Google Drive, that will be your best option for printing because that gives you all the control. And then from Google Drive, you can export to a PDF. You can probably also do that with the print button, actually. I haven't tried recently, but that's probably true too. But again, from where I sit, PDFs are usually not the most helpful tool because they close down conversation even between you and the person you're communicating with. This sheet is dynamic. As I'm talking to you and I'm thinking of new ideas, even though I already shared it with you, I can add to it. If you guys come up with ideas at the end, I can add that and you'll see those changes reflected in real time as I add them. So I would really save PDFs for when you want it to be something that families are printing, which could definitely be the case. And in that case, I would use it. Other questions? Okay, great. I'm gonna briefly, a few other things, but I'm gonna just do B'nai Mitzvah briefly. I'm curious about B'nai Mitzvah celebrations. I think this is like a developing thing. And again, a lot of educators have been reaching out to me. I would love to hear, this I'm not going to spend a lot of time on until I hear questions, reflections, thoughts from how you are all dealing with it. And maybe that's not your primary focus. I'll just say in brief that Safaria's sheets accommodate all or part of a Torah portion for Dvar Torah prep. So when you create a sheet, you can do insert, and one of the options is Parsha. So you can insert an entire Torah portion onto there. And then it just gets added, broken down by Aliyah. And then, of course, you can take off whatever you don't want. Alternatively, you could start from that text view. If you're working with a student, you might start with 1 or 2 verses that are in their Torah portion and build from there. I think, again, my educated guess is that we're all thinking about moving to smaller home-based celebrations. And I think it could be important to introduce Torah themes that are relevant. So I mean that in 2 ways. First of all, Safaria is set up for topical search and not just text search. So you may have a student who knows what their Torah portion is and really doesn't care. You could have a student like my son who was determined to speak about gun violence for his bar mitzvah, regardless of the week's Torah portion. I mean, really, he did not care. you might have a student who's passionate about social justice, and that is what they're going to speak about. You might have someone who's going to have their bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah in like 3 weeks, and probably they are going to think about themes that are relevant right now. Like they might even want to speak about something that relates to Torah and coronavirus or social isolation or community, something like that. Any one of these things, I'll pick social justice because that's a nice one. Any one of these things is searchable, although coronavirus is trending on Safari right now. But when I search for social justice, there are 13 texts and 167 sheets. All of these can be filtered. These can be filtered by group, and the text can be filtered by text. And it's really amazing to watch what students who are accustomed to using Google can do with this search feature. So if I had a bunch of different B Mitzvah students to manage right now, I would think about teaching them to use Safari search and pursuing those themes, and how can we then co-create resources that they can use. Again, this applies even in normal times. I helped a family a few weeks ago where family was coming in from all over from out of town, and they all wanted to kind of have a preview of the Torah portion of what the bat mitzvah girl was going to speak about. I helped them organize digital resources. I think that's going to be even more true in these next few weeks or months as we think about sharing materials across distances. So that's my brief bar bat mitzvah pitch. Again, mostly that is sort of a developing area that I have my eye on. And I'm curious to hear if you have any questions or comments or thoughts about that. I will check the chat. Yes, you can definitely add you can easily add an entire text to Safari. I recommend our teacher training series online, which is on that educator page I showed you, if you're not familiar with this. But the whole point of Safari, or not the whole point, but an important part of Safari is the ability to add materials without copying and pasting. So when I go to insert source, or I could have also just gone to that plus button, you can type in any citation that we have in our library. So Genesis 1 and hit enter gives me the whole text of Genesis 1. But alternatively, I could have just wanted a few verses. So Genesis 1, 1 through 5 will give me that. And the same would be true for a page of Talmud or a Mishnah from Pirkei Avot or anything like that. My feeling is you should copy and paste only when absolutely necessary, which might be if you have a text on your hard drive that we don't have on Safari, or someone emails you something. By the way, our media button is also great for adding text that you have in your physical library and don't have digitally available. And right now you cannot maybe go to your office copy machine and run off copies. You can take a picture of the page, upload it to your sheet, and it's easy to distribute that way. So those are all options as well. Other questions or comments? Okay, let's talk about Passover, which is, I think, on everyone's minds, definitely on my mind. We are working right now, Safaria's team, on a virtual Passover group. I think we're going to call it Seder on Safaria. I am sure I'm already seeing online, and maybe you are too, communities will fall out on all different sides of the debate around what can you do virtually, what can't you do virtually, do you use technology at the Seder, do you not use technology at the Seder? I'm going to leave that to other people to think about. But certainly all those mock Seder activities that you all had, I'm sure, planned for the next couple weeks, all the prep, all the getting ready, all of those things, right? That all has to happen virtually. And the Seder, I think we often like to talk about how it's such a tactile experience, and it's hard to be missing that right now. So we're going to build a packet of, it's going to be a group, it'll be a public group on Safaria, that allows people to see resources that are freely reusable, freely adaptable, easily adaptable, and really, I mean it, we're creating this literally as we speak. So if you have an activity that you know for sure you want to see in there, something you were planning in person and you're wondering how to get it online, something we should please think about, definitely let me know. You can put it in the chat, you can email me after, email hello@Safaria. We would love to know about it. So absolutely feel free to let us know about that, because again, these are resources that we're really creating right now. yeah, anyway, feel free to put that in the chat. I won't put you guys on the spot right now. Consider making a customized Haggadah among families, classes, or congregants. So this was the question before. How do we have a Haggadah? We do. You can find it on our website. I gotta get into a text page. Again, going back into our text. So if you click on liturgy, Siddur, all those things, as you scroll down, you will eventually get to, whoops, I missed it. You'll eventually get to the Haggadah, Ashkenazi and Eitot HaMizrach, and you can click there. One question we get a lot is, why don't you have X text? So if you're thinking, well, my favorite modern translation of the Haggadah is not here, you're right. That's because it's your favorite modern translation of the Haggadah and it's under copyright. And that's the reason, and we can't necessarily do anything about that, although you can feel free to let the publishers of said favorite Haggadah know that you would like that. But everything you see on Sefaria can be put into a sheet and can be adapted. So here's the text, and I put links into the sheet I shared with you for the template. Oh, 1 second, I have to get into view mode so I can actually click on this link. So here's our Haggadah template. This is just a sheet. It's a sheet with the entire text of the Haggadah in it. And if you click on that little button, you can make a copy of it, and then that will give you a fully editable copy of the sheet. So you can decide to take pieces out, you can change colors and fonts, you can retype an English translation that works better for you. You can obviously change between languages, so you want to be only in English or whatever it is. You can add student artwork, you can add video, you can add audio. Everything I said before about pairing media with Sefaria very much applies to this Haggadah. You could grab just a piece of it. You could challenge families to make their own Haggadah or Haggadah supplement. You could do something communal, right, a group project, any of those things. I think I included in this sheet one example from a couple of years ago about someone who made a family Haggadah on Sefaria. This is I think it's the Benor family Passover Haggadah. She basically just took the traditions from her family and put them into this Sefaria sheet, which I think, again, as we consider Passover experiences that are much more restricted than we've had, I think, for most of us in the past, families that can't travel to be together, grandparents who can't be there to hear their grandchildren sing the 4 questions or share family traditions with those grandchildren, I do think we're going to be looking for ways to share that. And this is a great place. This could be made into a document that's printable. It could be exported. I had a first grade day school class do a beautiful, beautiful class Haggadah a couple of years ago with student artwork responding to prompts, and it was really lovely. So all of those things are highly possible and highly encouraged. Again, using Sefaria. And think about all those other resources I mentioned about deputizing people to help and thinking about ways to get different constituencies involved. I sort of mentioned this, but Sefaria can also be a platform for helping people dig into the Passover story to find new resources, digitize stories or customs they might return to every year. I do think that a lot of families have traditions that are probably not written down. And again, this may be the year that they feel the need to write them down somewhere so they can share them. I think that's something to be aware of. Even just having like your Sunday school class share one Passover tradition on a Haggadah and sending that out to parents, I think that could be interesting. Certainly over Passover, I think there's a lot of opportunity for kids to take pictures of what Passover looks like in their home or themselves eating matzah or something like that and sharing that out. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And I think I'll pause there for questions or comments or thoughts, because I also want to know if I addressed fully that question about the Haggadah. Yes, no, everyone's set. Okay, great. I think, again, that there's a lot that's kind of unknown in terms of, again, what Passover will look like. So we're going to build these resources in conjunction with comments from the community about what people need and what people want. But again, I'm, in trying to be kind of like a glass half full person, I think there are a lot of opportunities here for thinking about what are some aspects of Passover that we maybe don't dig into as much usually because we are so busy with the physical, right? What does matzah look like and taste like? And I think every school I've ever been in has at least one day taken up with like the matzah factory people who come in and like make the matzah with the kids, right? Like there's a lot of tactile things that we do. I think part of our focus needs to be how can we reproduce that in family units? How can we show that online? But I think that there's also some creativity to exercise here around, since we can't do some of that, what are other pieces that we might do? Maybe it's more of a focus on storytelling. This is certainly, we're in a historic period right now. So what would you want to know from the Jews in Egypt, right? Like what kind of log are you going to keep to tell people about this constrained space that we're all in right now? I think that kind of creative thinking about, first of all, relevance, connections that kids can make, but also, again, what are the pieces of the story that are on like not your top 10 list, right? Like your top 10 list, again, is getting the kids to be able to sing Manish Tana and things like that. What's the second top 10 that doesn't always make it out because you're so busy with those other things? That this year maybe it's the time for that lesser top 10 list to shine. So those are the kinds of things that I'll be thinking about in creating this resource packet. And again, I really encourage you guys to share any thoughts that you have, any reflections that you have for the benefit of the community. I did not give you guys, I spared you my usual speech about making resources public on Sefaria, so you can thank me later. I'll just say that right now, again, with so much happening in silos and just of necessity, so many of us are in our own homes and not seeing a lot of other people. I think that there's a call, and if you're on, pretty much any educator listserv, you've probably seen people asking for resources, people offering resources. There's a tremendous movement to share resources out, which I think is great. And we all have the opportunity to be a part of that change just by clicking to make sheets public on Sefaria. So this sheet, as I go into edit mode, right, and this was always destined to be public, so no great gift, right, but I created it, I kept it private while I was working on it, and now I'm gonna toggle it over so that it's listed on Sefaria. And anyone can find this, and I hope that they do, because I'm not thinking about keeping things private, I'm thinking about how can I get resources out to the rest of the Jewish world? And I think that on some level, we're all thinking about that as well. Any final reflections, questions, thoughts you might have, anything you want to share? Okay. Feel free to be in touch, really. Again, the best email address I think is the hello one because it's checked the most frequently. So hello@sefaria.org. Oops, I need to send that to everyone. Again, our educator page, sefaria.org/educators. And I'm looking forward to being virtually in touch with all of you. Please reach out anytime. Take care, guys. Stay healthy and keep teaching. Thanks all.